What's up? Welcome back to another Break It Down for Brackets podcast. Today's topic is something that I know pretty much zero about. It's parenting. Not just parenting though, parenting with a chronically ill child. So I brought in some specialists. I have 3 parents here. And this conversation is being led by my friend Jami.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
I'm Jami. I'm a mom. I've got 2 kids, one of which is a type 1 diabetic with some inattentive ADHD problems. So I like to say that all of our parents are badasses. Parenting the chronically ill child makes you a little more badass, just because you got a little more challenges than you would normally. And so my guests today are Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie, and Jeannette.
Hello.
Hi. So Stephanie, let's talk about you.
I have he's 10 now, double-digit mom, that's a little scary, and he pretty much been sick all of his life, up until age 3. He had been diagnosed with a nut allergy, he had respiratory issues, he had acid reflux, just all kinds of craziness, and at 3, things really changed. He got an ear infection that never went away. It turned out to be, luckily, a benign tumor, but that has caused a myriad of problems, and we just last August had surgery number 7 or 8. I've actually stopped counting how many surgeries have been involved in all of this. And then right after that, he was diagnosed with ADHD, inattentive type, and borderline autism spectrum disorder. So that just adds to the craziness.
And so do you have any other kids, or just
No, just one. We just have one kid, and my husband, Greg. That's just the 3 of us at home, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And what about you, Jeannette? Let's talk about you.
Sure. So I'm new to West Virginia. My husband is from Shepherdstown.
Okay. Where are you from?
I'm from Baltimore,
nice,
Towson area.
Okay.
We moved here 2 years ago, and I'm loving it. I love the small town life. We have a 3-year-old Macy. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes last summer during COVID, which kind of compounded everything. Made it a lot harder for in-person support, doctor visits where they only wanted one parent. All the little things have just been a lot harder, I would say, because of the pandemic.
Right. So I actually have 2 kids. I have a grown son. Some of you know Richard. Hey, son, if you're listening. And then I have a 15-year-old who thinks she knows everything. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 11, so we're 3.5 years in. I missed the whole fun of parenting a small child with diabetes. I'm sure that comes with its own unique challenges.
Oh, yes.
And, of course, I don't know if they do this for the young, but I'm going to segue here a little bit into talking about the kid conditions.
Yeah.
So when you have a kid that's 11 and they're diagnosed with a chronic health condition, they basically will test you for everything under the sun. So she also has celiac. We did the endoscopy and went through all that fun stuff. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder, not to be confused with type 2, which is metabolic. And so with the autoimmune disorder, type 1 kids are also susceptible to celiac and hypothyroidism, which they call the autoimmune trifecta. So if they have 2, they're most likely going to develop the 3rd one at some point in their lives. So we're monitoring for that right now. Luckily, she doesn't have it, but we do have the type 1. And also what they tell you is get your kid into therapy, because a chronic diagnosis is something that adults have a problem dealing with. So compound that with a kid whose brain's not fully developed and can't comprehend necessarily all the things that they have to do. So they say get you into therapy. So we've been through therapists for about 3 years, and we just got the inattentive ADHD diagnosis ourselves. So some other things about type 1 diabetes, maybe you can chime in here.
Sure.
So the pancreas doesn't work. It just simply doesn't make insulin, and insulin, well, you need it to live. So
Pretty important
stuff. And so, we've heard all of this, and she's so funny when she's talking to people that don't know a lot about it. And some of her teachers are even like, can you tell the class about this? Because they know that she knows more than they do. And so, she'll have sugar. She'll have the snacks that they have to have. And, well, should you be eating that? She gets that from her friends all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, yes, she kind of needs it, especially if she goes low. So,
yeah.
So what about you?
We've been teaching my daughter, that she can have the extra snacks when she goes low. So she came up to me the other day and said, my sugar is high. I can have apple juice. And I was like, no, if your sugar's high, you need insulin. But she's trying. She's 3.
Yeah.
She just did her first finger stick on herself last week, which was really exciting.
Nice.
We've been trying to, involve her in her care as much as possible. explain things to her so that she knows what's going on, but in a 3-year-old way, which is also a little hard to break it down sometimes.
Right.
You know, it was a huge adjustment at first. It was pretty upsetting for everybody, and it took her a couple months to kind of figure out, you know, like, this is my new routine, and now she just doesn't even think twice about it. I tell her I need to check her finger, it's time for insulin, and she, you know, pulls down her pants and she's ready to go.
So are you guys doing a continuous glucose monitor, or are you doing finger sticks all the time?
We're doing both.
Both.
Because, so she's still honeymooning, so her pancreas at times will put out its own insulin, but there's no rhyme or reason for that.
Exactly.
Which makes everything super fun. So sometimes, you know, you can get the right dose and, you know, the right timing and everything, and it just goes to hell on you. It just doesn't work out.
So are you using injectable pens? Does she have a pump yet?
No pump. I'm really on the fence about that myself, just because there's a lot of things that can go wrong with it. I know it's really helpful for a lot of people, but she has a lot of like sensory sensitivity, and just doing the glucose monitor has been like a huge challenge that we've just kind of gotten over. So I think one thing at a time is probably good, especially for younger kids that are going to be dealing with this for their whole life.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't do the insulin pump yet either. We are 3 years out, and our endocrinologist still says Kate has some of the best numbers that she's ever seen. And so, she's
I'm going to have to talk to you.
Okay. I wish that I knew what the trick was, because I honestly don't know.
Every day is so different.
Yeah, we do fight every day.
I feel like we need a podcast just on diabetes.
I mean, I could do that.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, I have a lot of questions that don't have to do with parenting
Okay.
about what you're talking about, but this is not the place to ask them. So
Right.
I think that'd be good for the future.
Okay.
That would be cool.
Tuck that in our back pocket.
Right, and then you guys should share some tricks with each other that's worked, because hers is a little one and yours is a little bit older.
Right.
What are some tricks that you've come up? Or am I jumping ahead?
You're jumping ahead.
Right on.
You tried.
All right.
Watch me turn my volume back down.
So Stephanie, tell me about Colin. So let me see if I get this right. Cholesteatoma?
Yeah, that's correct.
Oh, yay. Yeah, so tell me about that. So you said, was he born with that?
We think so. The doctors think so, because at age 3, when they found out that that's what it was, they're like, they don't grow this big in children this small. It takes years for them to grow this way. So he more than likely was born with this. And what that is, it's basically skin that builds up in your inner ear, and it forms like a cyst, and it just continues to grow and grow and grow and collect material over time. And his had, he had an ear infection. It busted his eardrum. He got really sick to the point where antibiotics weren't working. We were doing compound pharmacies, which if you don't know what those are, they're like Dexter's Laboratory, and they make up these weird compounds, and then you go pick them up, and your insurance doesn't pay for it because that's experimental stuff. And so finding compound pharmacies is also difficult. So we did some of that, and finally we were referred to an ENT specialist in Chantilly, and they did a CAT scan. We weren't even home from the CAT scan from Fairfax, and they called back and said, you have to bring him back to our office, and then we're admitting you to the hospital. And of course, as a parent, you freak out because they say surgical biopsy. And you're like,
oh, that's
scary stuff right there. MRIs and surgical biopsies on 3-year-olds is pretty scary.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
So we took him back. We found out when we took him back to the office that day that he was deaf in both ears. He wasn't hearing like anything, which we did not realize. We're like, oh, that explains loud, 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 everything. He got the MRI, and the doctor would not talk to me. And she said, your specialist will be in a little bit, and you're going to go home tonight. And we're like, immediately heart sank because something serious is wrong. And that's when the doctor said, he has cancer. And the whole world just went blank. And I never heard another word the doctor said after that. And I finally had to say to her, did you just say my child had cancer? And she's like, yes, we're pretty sure that's what this is in here. And she said, you can see it's grown very close to his brain and his facial cranial nerve, and we can't tell if it's attached itself to those things. So we're not going to biopsy it because it has to come out pretty quickly because you got serious thing going on here. My friend was standing there with me. Greg had Colin in the hospital playroom, and luckily she heard everything else the doctor said because I heard nothing. Like, she didn't explain to me what was going on because you hear cancer and you're just like floored. We had difficulty getting an appointment with the next specialist, who was a neuro ENT, and I begged the lady at the office, like, they said my child has cancer, I'll come anywhere at any time.
Right.
So that prompted, a 3-day later trip to Fairfax for a 7 a.m. appointment, which they said he either had rhabdomyosarcoma or a condition called Langerhans syndrome, which would have required a year's worth of chemotherapy if he had that. So he had to have x-rays of his entire body. So we held a 3-year-old down when he screamed while 2 x-ray technicians x-rayed every single part of his body. They forgot the tip of his thumb, and we had to start over again. And I'm like, you forgot to be kidding me. And she goes, he could have a tumor on the tip of his thumb. And I'm like, I don't think he does. But they were adamant that they had to get a picture of it. It wasn't Langerhans. Thank goodness he had no tumors anywhere else. But then it was, okay, we're not going to know what this is until we do surgery. So we took him to Fairfax on July 7th of that year. He was, 3.5, and we sent him back into surgery and had no clue what the outcome was going to be. Like, he could have been paralyzed. He could have been all sorts of things coming out of surgery. So it was really difficult as a parent to send your 3-year-old into surgery and not have any clue what the outcome was going to be.
Right,
and when they finally, 4 hours later, came out, and the doctor was like, you're not going to believe this. And we're like, well, at this point, we're going to believe anything. And he goes, it was a benign cholesteatoma. But it was big, and it destroyed his entire ear, and he's gonna be deaf. And we're like, well, we'll take it. It's like,
wow.
When you're like, we'll take deafness over.
That's dodging a very huge bullet.
Dodging a huge bullet. And the doctor was like, I was absolutely shocked. They were convinced it was something way more serious based on the size and how young he was.
Wow.
So we consider ourselves super lucky.
Right. And so he's hearing impaired both ears?
1 ear. The other ear was able to be fixed through some other minor tube surgeries and some other things.
Oh, nice.
But, the left ear where the tumor was, we've had a second tumor that was a surprise. And we've had several other reconstructive surgeries. And we're slated for surgery number 8 or 9 again this summer, which will be the 3rd summer in a row he's had surgery.
So is it recurring cholesteatoma, or are these different types of tumors?
The second one was a cholesteatoma. They had no clue it was there. They actually had gone in 2 summers ago when he was 8 to do a big reconstructive surgery to hope restore some of his hearing. And when they got in there, they were like, oh, there's another one, and it had grown as big as the first one, and this one had literally grown through a bone that they were going to use to do the bone grafts with.
Oh,
so they had to use all cadaver bone, which they don't think. They think all the cadaver bone has dissolved because of an infection in the surgery site.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Awesome. So Stephanie touched on something that I hadn't really put down as a question because it's hard to talk about, but we'll talk about diagnoses. Mm-hmm. And so we know how Colin was diagnosed with his. Kate was 11, and she was, active kid. She's swimming. She starts drinking a lot. And I'm thinking, Now, a little bit of background on me is I have a lifetime of experience with type 1 diabetes. My dad was a type 1 diabetic. My brother's a type 1 diabetic. I had gestational diabetes with both pregnancies. So I know, quite a fair amount about this disease. But we didn't have any girls, right, with the symptoms. And so, I looked at the drinking a lot, and I'm like, well, she's swimming all the time. She was on swim teams, so she's swimming 4 days a week. We're outside, we're running around. Of course, she's going to be thirsty. And then there were the increased trips to the bathroom, and I'm like, well, she's drinking a lot, right? So naturally, she would be using the bathroom. And she says, at 11, she's like, Mom, I have a yeast infection. Or she was describing the symptoms.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. So I did all the over-the-counter stuff. It worked. She went to camp. For a week. She comes back. She's like, I'm still having the same problems. I was a week before I was scheduled to go out of town on a race. I was like, okay, I'll take you to urgent care. We'll get some prescriptions. We'll get this done. And the first thing they did at urgent care was test her blood sugar. And I knew when they stuck her finger what they were doing. And I was like, it didn't even occur to me. I was like, why are you doing that? And I'm thinking this in my head. And her sugar was over 200 at that point. It wasn't that high, but it was high enough that they said, when did she last eat? And when I told them it had been a few hours, they said, you need to take her to the hospital. And when they told me that there in the urgent care, I knew what the problem was. I took her to the hospital. I called my husband and I was like, okay, so I'm just taking her. I'm not coming to get you. I'm not going home. I'm taking her straight to Lansdowne, and we're going to get this solved. And when we were in the Lansdowne ER and the doctor told me what she had, I went into the bathroom and I lost my entire shit. for like 10 minutes.
Oh, absolutely.
I was just like, this is my fault. It was devastating. It's a hard thing. It's a very hard thing to deal with when your kid is diagnosed with something like that.
Why is it your fault?
It's genetic, right? It's my bad genes that led to this. And that was a very real thing for me to have to process.
Okay.
So yeah, so the diagnosis day is not something that I like to talk about very often. So, and we're back. Okay, so we're talking about diagnosis days. So Jeannette, tell me about Macy's diagnosis day.
Yeah, so a lot of what you were saying is actually bringing up a lot of memories. It was a Tuesday morning. I'll never forget it. You know exactly what you were wearing. Of course, I didn't eat breakfast that day. It was a long day. So my daughter she was 2.5. She had been doing a lot of the same things as Jamie's daughter. Drinking a lot of water, going to the bathroom a lot. Luckily, she was already potty trained, so we noticed that she was going to the bathroom a lot more. She was wetting the bed at night, which, she hadn't done in months and months. So kind of knew something was up. I was hoping it was just a phase. We started kind of restricting her water, which is the opposite of what you're supposed to do. But,
right.
I mean, we had no idea. So I'm not going to feel guilty about that. But, at the time, that's not what her body needed. She needed that water. But my husband kind of pushed me to call the pediatrician. I told them what was going on, how much water should she be drinking a day? And they said, well, that may be a sign for diabetes. And I was floored. I had absolutely no idea. We started Googling the symptoms. Everything was matching. My heart was pounding. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. So next morning, luckily my husband had been working from home. I took her to the pediatrician. He waited in the car. They did the finger stick. She was over 300.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Which, was high enough that they knew. Luckily, I got her to go to the bathroom there, which was a feat in itself because she hates public bathrooms. Another one of our fun sensory things that we don't like to do.
Sensory issues.
Yeah, it just makes everything super fun.
Yes, it does.
So, yeah, that first finger stick and got everything underway. They told us, don't go home. Go right to the ER in Fairfax, which was, over an hour away. We didn't have anything with us. I didn't have my phone charger, nothing. So luckily my husband's parents live right down the road. They broke into our house, got a few things, met us at the gas station. We drove to Fairfax and stayed there for 3 days. It was that was the first day of a new adventure, I'll say.
The new normal, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
So in parenting, we can't obviously ask, well, how is it different in parenting I'm going to use quotes here, air quotes, normal kid versus a kid with the condition? You figure out cheats along the way, especially for things like type 1 diabetes. Like I'm sure you figured out the cheats about, they get a lot of protein and they can eat a little more carbs because it will slow the absorption.
Right.
For Kate, ice cream does not actually spike her as high as other treats do. So we always make sure that we keep ice cream in the house. I also know you'll discover this. Hormones can have interesting effects on blood glucose levels. And so
I've been
I watch
for
that. And when her sugars run high, I'm like, I know what's coming next week.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. Luckily, we're only 3, so we have some time.
And so do you notice with her lows, because 3 is the great age with all the tantrums, right?
Oh, yes.
And how much worse are they now when she's experiencing a low?
So she actually is asymptomatic for her lows, which is really terrifying because she can drop down to 50 and just be absolutely normal and playing and we have no idea. So that's where the glucose monitor comes in. It's a lifesaver when it works. Technology is helpful when it works. But yeah, it's a little device that she wears on her arm. We change it every 10 days if it lasts that long. Usually it doesn't, unfortunately.
Oh, really?
No, we've not had good luck with that.
Oh.
So that's just another fun piece of it. But we've gotten to the point where she's doing better with the changes and everything, taking it on and off. That used to be pretty bad.
Yeah, it's pretty traumatic.
Yeah, but right now we're still, her levels we're doing better. She's about 70% in range, which is good for her age. We still have a lot of highs, a lot of lows, kind of try to hang out in the middle where we can. But yeah, it's just, we actually got her tested for autism because before diagnosis, she had been having a lot of sensory things that she didn't like. She was having a lot of tantrums, like more than she's my first kid. So I didn't know, like, is this normal? It doesn't seem normal. This is crazy. Was not normal because her blood sugars were all over the place. We had no idea.
But the sensory issues aren't caused by, are they worse when she's high or low, or?
No, we didn't know. That was like kind of leading up to it. Yeah.
What about Colin's sensory issues?
The hearing causes a lot of sensory issues. We actually experienced, you watch those videos on social media where babies get hearing aids for the first time and they're like, we actually experienced that. Like, we didn't realize how deaf he was until they put that hearing aid on, and his is computer programmed from the audiologist, so he can't change any of the settings. He can't turn the volume up and down. It's completely controlled at their office when we go there via like Bluetooth or something. And when she turned that thing on, it was like, wow, what is it? But then it opened up this whole new world of, all of a sudden, you have a 3-year-old who won't go to the bathroom in public because he can't stand the sound of automatic flushing toilet and hand dryers.
Yes.
Because they're different. He's never heard them before the way that they should be heard. So they're super loud. He can't stand the blender. You turn the blender on, he gets super angry when you run the blender. Like, making a smoothie just makes him angry. Like, the vacuum cleaner that makes him angry. Like, any chirping noises, like if a smoke alarm battery starts it out, you gotta change it immediately. The fire alarm at school was a big issue. And part of it is he couldn't hear these things. And then we get this borderline spectrum disorder, which we're pretty sure he's fully on the spectrum. He needs another assessment, but it's 4 hour long. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we kind of don't want to take him back and have him deal with all that right now.
Right.
But he just, those little things really set him off, and he retreats. Mm-hmm. He doesn't like eating dinner at the table with a lot of people he's unfamiliar with. He just retreats. So his sensory issues kind of really affect his navigating the world sometimes. He deals pretty well with it. He handles it pretty well, and he controls it a lot better than some kids would. And I think that's because we worked with him a lot on, this bothers you, we get that, but it's okay. We need to figure out a way to overcome this.
Right.
So, yeah.
So did he throw a lot of fits when he was younger? Because he couldn't verbalize what's wrong?
At holidays, I drug him away from the table and up the steps physically before screaming and yelling with our entire family, 10, 12 people looking at me like I was a nut job because I wouldn't force him to sit there and eat dinner with them. And I'm like, you guys don't get it. This is really hard for him.
Right.
And even now, not a lot. Like, it's funny because I come here and I publicly say, hey, my kid has ADHD and he's on the autism spectrum probably. And not a lot of people know that because we haven't told a lot of people. And we finally, about 4 months after the diagnosis, started telling some family, and they reacted really strangely. Like, one family member was like, oh, I figured that's what was wrong with him, which was kind of like, what do you mean you figured that's what was wrong with him? My mom was really upset because she felt sorry for him.
Right.
And so it's trying to get them to understand how to react to him when he has these kind of meltdowns and tantrums, because sometimes people think you're bad parenting because you're not like, get up and behave.
Right.
But really, I have to let my kid get this out of his system. Give him 10 minutes and then we'll be back to normal,
Yeah, there's so much going on under the surface that people just don't understand or don't want to deal with or don't have time for, especially in public. People feel uncomfortable. They want it to stop.
I was lucky in that my kid was not diagnosed with, any of her issues until, she was 11. And, at first the therapist was like, she has anxiety and depression. And then this new therapist that she's with, we've had 5 therapists in a year and a half.
Oh my goodness.
That alone is another podcast. Like, the burnout in the mental health field is ridiculous right now. And I feel for all of them. But it's hard when, your doctor is like, go get this help for your kid, and then your kid's like, I don't want to do this anymore because I don't want to tell another person my trauma for the 6th time. And but she's good now. We found someone. She is actually the CEO of the counseling service that we use, so she's not going anywhere unless the business fails. But she has worked with her for about 3 months, and then she's like, I don't think that the problem is not the anxiety. The problem is something deeper. And then so she says she has ADHD inattentive type, and it's caused Like, she believes that to be the underlying cause of the anxiety and depression. But ever since Kate was little, and maybe this is a function of the fact that she had an older sibling, so we're always big on use your words. What is the matter with you? So when she would scream or cry or whatever, okay, tell me why, what is the matter? And sometimes it would be as simple as, there's a tag bothering her. Or my daughter is incredibly resistant to change. So you moved something in my room. Now the room is a mess. Maybe I did move something. I don't know. But getting her to have us like use our words. Now we still do a lot of tantrums. I mean, it's sometimes really difficult to parent a teenager and go, what is the teenage opposition? What is the ADHD? Or what is your sugar? Because I have nail polish on her wall right now due to a low, which she insists was not caused by the low. And I'm like, okay, well, we're just going to have to agree to disagree on that issue. Because she was mad at me and she threw some nail polish against the wall and it wasn't closed. And I said, well, there you go. Clean it up.
I get the, like, we can't, one of our big things is we can't say we're going to, on Saturday mornings, we kind of, during the pandemic, we've had a routine. We go to Black Dog Coffee, we go to Dunkin' Donuts, and then we do any other errands that we might need to do. Oh, we swapped it up and we went to the bank first. You have to go in the exact order you said you were going, or else he doesn't understand why. And trying to reason with him is like, and I'm like, oh my goodness. It's interesting to hear you guys talk about how you know something is wrong with your child with their diabetes. Because the only way we know something is usually wrong with Colin's ear is it smells horrific. It smells absolutely. You'll sit near him and you'll be like, oh, you have an ear infection. You smell today.
Okay.
Like the other night, he was sitting on the couch with me and I'm like, you need a shower. And then I'm like, no, that's not typical 10-year-old boy. I've been outside sweaty. And then I start looking in his ear and I'm like, you need some ear drops tonight because, which he absolutely hates and does not like to get because, 7 years of people squirting ear drops in your ear practically every night of your life. Gets old after a while. But I could tell because I'm sitting next to him and I'm like, oh, that's a horrific smell you have going on there. And we worry about that because we're worried like other kids are going to be like, dude, you stink. And it's not something he can control. And we have this conversation with the doctor all the time. Like, when is this going to stop? And they can't tell us when it's going to stop.
Well, maybe one thing about going into middle school is they all smell. So maybe they won't notice because for some reason kids hit 10, 11, 12, they don't want to bathe anymore. I don't know what that's about. But
maybe they'll all be smelly and no one will notice that he has an extra odd smell about him sometimes.
So one of the things that helps with us in avoiding the meltdown is allowing them to make decisions as much as they're capable of. So like that would maybe, does that help with Colin when he makes the decisions, when you keep the routine kind of the same? Yeah. Anything else help with meltdown avoidance there?
Just a good forewarning of, hey, this is what we're, this is what's going to happen today. And then and this is the issue with other people, not with us, because we never tell him, sometimes we avoid telling him things in advance because if it's not something that's a 100% guarantee, like if it's an outdoor activity or you're going somewhere but plans could change because of weather or whatever, we never tell him too far in advance because then he's dead set on it occurring. And then when it doesn't occur, it's like traumatic. But getting other people to not say, yeah, you can do this, go ask your mom and dad. And then we're like, no, he can't do that. Like, that's really hard because now we have to be the bad guy. And then other people don't always understand why we're saying no. No, that's not okay for him to do. So getting other people to understand, please speak to us before you speak to him is really important. Because if you say yes and we have to say no, we have to deal with the backlash of you being like, oh, well, why isn't it okay? And then let people be like, especially family, why isn't it okay? Well, it's not okay because, whatever, for whatever reason. So, yeah.
So, and what about for Macy? What do we do to avoid meltdowns? Now, I will tell you with the decision making, so when Kate was first diagnosed, she didn't want to do, she pretty much took the finger sticks. I mean, she was 11. So she pretty much started to do the finger sticks from the beginning, but she did not want to give herself insulin. And so what we did was, okay, you're not on a time limit here, except that when I think at that point, she was in middle school, so the nurse was still assisting with the injections. So I was like, you can do this at your own pace, and whatever you're ready for, you do. And so, for a long time I was giving her the injections, and then she got comfortable with the mealtime injections, and I was only giving the bedtime. And then before she went to camp, that was an incredible kind of motivator for her, was the next summer after she was diagnosed, she wanted to go back to Girl Scout camp. And I'm like, then you can't go unless you can give yourself your nighttime shot, because I won't be there and they're not trained to. And so she was like, okay. And about 2 weeks before camp, she goes, I think I'm ready.
Wow.
And so I watched her until she went to camp. And then when she got back, she's a pro at this now. And so it's good that Macy's starting to like stick her finger. It's just,
yeah, she's definitely like becoming more involved. We'll ask her where she wants her injection. She always picks the same place. But, the doctor said that's okay right now.
Right.
She's making the decision. We're not like overusing the area. You can kind of space it out. Yep. So it's fine. So she does pick the same spot every time. So we've been doing that for a couple weeks, and actually it's been really good.
Good.
We've been able to do more stuff while she's sleeping than we did initially. It used to wake her up, like traumatic, screaming, crying every time we tried to do a finger stick while she was sleeping. But now she kind of just like rolls over and doesn't care, which is really nice.
Are you still having to do the middle of the night kind of finger sticks, or do you just check the Dexcom?
Some of both.
Okay.
Yeah, our night times have been a little rough lately. We kind of had like 2 up-all-nighters in a row. So
oh, wow.
Hoping tonight's a little smoother. But yeah, I think, she's definitely more used to it than she used to be. Giving her options, about what she wants to eat. I think we were like pretty restrictive initially, just because we weren't sure like what was safe or,
right.
like what was going to spike her too much. And now, she can have treats as long as it's like with her meal and with her insulin and stuff like that. So I think that's going a lot better too. So I think just as a family, we're starting to figure it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's been about 8 months.
What is the go-to for her to combat lows?
Oranges.
Oranges?
She loves an orange. Yep.
So it's really fun having a diabetic that's a really picky eater, because we've had to change out our go-tos more than once. We went from Smarties to gummy bears to M&Ms, and she's like, no, I'm tired of this. And even just trying to keep them eating on a regular schedule is sometimes just impossible.
Yeah, sometimes she'll be like, well, I'm not hungry, and I know it's because she doesn't want her injection.
Right.
And I'm like, well, you still got to eat. We got to get this done. A timer's been really helpful. She likes to watch the timer go down, so that's been good.
Nice.
More TV time than I'd like to admit to, but right now, sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly. Exactly. So what is the toughest thing parenting a kid with a chronic condition, do you think?
Constantly being at the hospital and watching other kids with chronic conditions, or at the doctor's office. I mean, I remember the first time Colin was in the hospital, and they told us he had cancer. There was a little girl in the playroom who had cancer, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be what's wrong with our child. And I watched the mom, who was angry at this little girl who was probably no more than 10. She was tiny. Look at the little girl, didn't want to eat, and the mom was like, fine, don't eat, and they're going to put in a feeding tube, and you can deal with it.
Wow.
And I was like, it was heartbreaking, because I'm like, oh my gosh, is this going to be my reality? And the little girl was like, well, I'll go eat a bagel. Like, I'll eat a bagel to shut you up kind of thing. So seeing other sick kids is really hard. Fighting insurance, that's hard. And we've had several. Our first surgery to have the tumor removed was denied. It was deemed medically unnecessary.
Wow.
And I had a curt conversation with Anthem in Richmond about what part of removing a tumor from a 3-year-old so he can maybe hear or not hear is deemed medically unnecessary. And they finally approved the surgery, but would not approve for him to stay in the hospital. They would only approve it as an in and out surgery.
Wow.
And going into a surgery like that, not knowing what the outcome was, even our surgeon, even our doctor was PO'd and called the insurance company. It was like, these people live hour and a half with no traffic from Fairfax. This is a 3-year-old, and I have no clue what I'm going to find when I get in there. And they're like, oh, well, he can stay for 23 hours, but at the 23-hour mark, we consider them inpatient, and then we no longer pay. So literally, the nurse was like, he's got to eat this popsicle in the next 2 hours because you got to go.
Wow.
I mean, and you're like, eat the popsicle quick. They're not going to let you go unless you eat the popsicle. And that's hard for a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And then the last luckily all the other surgeries have been small enough surgeries that we weren't worried about super complications. Like the last surgery was 45 minutes, but the one before that, when they found the second tumor, he was in surgery for 4 hours. So he's under anesthesia with a laser probe in his forehead. They've removed bone, they've put in bone, they've taken out a tumor, they've done all sorts of craziness. They've lasered him, and we can't stay at the hospital.
Wow.
And then Greg threw a fit, and they let us stay for observation. But the doctor wasn't nice to us. The hospital doctor,
Right.
wasn't nice to us because we technically weren't supposed to be there. So she kept bringing in all these student doctors to look at our child, and then take the bandage off, put it back on, take the bandage off. So when we got home from that surgery, he didn't speak to us for 3 days.
Wow.
And Greg was devastated because he was really upset. Like, he's mad at us. And I'm
Right.
like, well, first of all, we didn't do a good job preparing him for this surgery. So I love hearing that you guys, Jeannette, include your daughter, Macy, in all of the steps, and you explain these things to her, because as parents, that's one of the things that we had failed on prior to the last big surgery when he was 8, was we weren't really good at explaining, like, hey, this is exactly what's going to happen, and this is exactly what could happen afterwards. We were really bad at that, because we're like, if we don't tell him, he won't have any anxiety about it, and they'll just wheel him into surgery and wheel him back out, and everything will be great. Yeah, we learned a hard lesson when he didn't speak to us for 3 days. We got the silent treatment. When you get a silent treatment from an 8-year-old, that's difficult. And then he finally came around, and we apologized. We're like, we're really sorry that we didn't prepare you enough for all of that. Yeah, so that's important. If you have chronic illness, kid, you got to prepare them, people. You can't just be like, hey, we're going to the doctor today, and I'm not telling you what's happening.
Exactly.
That's not okay, and we had to learn that the hard way. So now we're very upfront with him. Every doctor's appointment, everything. We don't send them out of the room when they talk about surgery. We don't send them out of the room when they talk about anything. We're like, you need to be here and you need to know this.
Yep.
But yeah.
I think the hardest thing in my opinion is when they just want a day off. And it's like, that's not how it works. You know, she'll be so sad someday. She's like, I just wish I didn't have to worry about it today. And I'm like, I wish nothing more than that for you. And, you know, I think that's where running kind of helps, because if I'm tired and I'm only in like mile 3 and I've got, 4 miles to go, I'm like, okay, can't give up. So neither can you. Get your ass moving. And, so that's it, because they can't take a day off either. So
yeah, that's huge. It's constant,
Yeah.
Like I was just feeling really overwhelmed the other day about, personal things and diabetes things and just kind of everything in general. And my husband was like, well, what's wrong? And I'm like, where should I start? You know, like, I mean, it's just, you just need a little break, and you don't get that. And they don't get it either. Like you said, this is their life, and you got to make it as positive as you can. And, I try not to get upset in front of her, because I don't want her to think, there's something wrong with her, whatever. But I mean, all of our playing, we have like doctor's supplies, and like, she gives me insulin, and she gives her teddy bear insulin, and, she'll check my mom's finger, and, I mean, that's her life right now. Yeah. And it's sad, but it's, it's preparing her for her future.
And so that's just it. When you want a break, I mean, it's hard enough for parents in general just to take that break, right? To realize I need to step back and do some self-care. But I think when you have a chronically ill kid, that's even harder. Like, who's your go-to caregiver if it's not you?
My husband. I mean,
and if you guys want date night, do you have a sitter?
No, I mean, it's been, since COVID, we haven't had, I mean, his parents have been over a few times, and, my parents come over, but they don't know, I wouldn't even know where to start, and, trying to train somebody how to do that. I mean, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
We're sending her to preschool in the fall, and I'm just like, I don't know what that looks like, Her needs in 5 months could be a lot different than they are now.
Yeah, they can. What about you?
We used to have 2 wonderful teenage babysitters that were they were daughters of friends of ours, but now they both are away. One is, grown up and has a job, and the other one is away in Pennsylvania at college. And we relied on Greg's mom a lot, but she's now, on dialysis and has lots of other issues, so she's not able to do it. And then my parents do it, but then Colin experiences a lot of anxiety when he spends too much time with my mother. And we're not even sure where all that comes from. And so we try to limit that unsupervised time. But it's finding someone that just understands all his quirks and isn't going to be like, this kid is bad. Like, he's quirky. Like, he's a great kid. He's quirky. But trying to find people who understand all his quirks and are like, oh, this is just how he is. Like, he's great and he's
Right.
quirky. But trying to find someone that understands all his quirks. And I think it worries us more than it probably would worry someone else. We probably could have someone come over and it would be fine. But we worry about how is he going to react to what happens if he has a meltdown and someone, random babysitter's here. What is their reaction to him going to be? So we don't go out a lot without him.
Right.
A lot. So when we do, it's like, kidless time.
So
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so Kate was diagnosed at 11. So we're and so at that point, you know, if we want to do something, if we wanted to do something pre-pandemic, either her brother would come up and watch her, or my mom was available. And of course, my mom married my dad, is familiar with diabetes, so we got lucky there. Now that she's older, you know, she can be left at home by herself. Now, we still don't like to do that for a long period of time, especially considering where we live. It's kind of remote, and so we're like, yeah, we don't like the idea that she's far away from everything and by herself. So we just tend to not leave her alone that much. But our biggest problem right now is, you know, she is not in school. She's at home. She's remote learning. She's been out of school now for a year with the pandemic. She's not going to go back until the summer in-person school. And so trying to keep her safe, trying to keep us safe, but still trying to get her socialization. And so she has a group of like 4 or 5 core friends, and they've kept in touch over the internet and texting and stuff like that during the pandemic. They get together about once or twice a month. And it's, you know, where are you going? Who are you going to be with? Are you going to be outside or inside? Do you have your mask? Do you have snacks? And that is the biggest thing. It's just she'll go, Mom, don't follow me. You know, okay, fine, you're 15. I'm not going to follow you. Do you have snacks? No. Okay, well, now you need to tell me where you are, and I have to find you in town when you run in the streets. Which isn't often, but they do it. She did it yesterday, and I was like, where are you? Because I need to come bring you your snacks. And what do you want? And oh, by the way, no, chocolate isn't a good snack. It doesn't bring your sugar up fast enough.
Right. You have to take a suitcase with you anytime you leave the house.
Yeah. And where's your water? All the time, where's your water?
Yep. Yeah, hydration is really hard for a 3-year-old too. You have to
Where's your hearing aid? Where's your hearing aid?
Yeah.
The thing's expensive. That's the other thing. Insurance doesn't cover hearing aids for children.
Wow.
It's not medically necessary. Like, sorry, you guys could saw my facial expression there. It was like WTF look. Yeah, it's
I believe
not
it.
medically necessary.
We've
one hearing aid was almost $3,000.
Wow.
So we guard that thing with our life.
I bet you do. Yeah, we've had some insurance issues with the Dexcom, you know, and having the endocrinologist write more than one letter to various insurance companies that, yes, this is medically necessary. And then, oh, we're getting it here. Well, now you have to get it here. And then having that place stock it. Or, oh, you need, you know, $1,000 up front. Or, you know, we're only going to cover 40% of it or whatever. And I think the thing that makes me mad, have you dealt with like insurance changes and insulin changes? Because the new insurance doesn't cover what they were on.
So our insurance hasn't changed, but they've stopped covering our go-to pharmacy, which is really upsetting.
Yeah.
Because they know how to get what we need. The other pharmacy, we've had 3 or 4 like pretty major errors that, you know, are really important when you're dealing with medication and insulin and all that stuff. So you got to get it right.
We could do a whole separate podcast on insurance alone and the problems with that.
Plan on it.
So so how are we on time anyway? Let me do a time check.
5 minutes.
All right.
10 minutes. Just go ahead and do what you want. I'm enjoying this.
Because again, I have the 504 plan section we could talk about, but that is another hour in and of itself.
That's a fun one. That's
What about support? That'd be a good topic.
So
how do you guys support each other? Or how do you learn what you're supposed to learn? I mean, especially when you're in shock, kind of like you were when you thought it was cancer. It's hard, you know. So how do you support each other? Are there groups? What's going on like that?
So I think in the flurry of information that they gave us from the hospital, there is a support group locally. I'm not sure. Did they give you any of that information?
No, they were just like, oh, you can find one locally, but I haven't really been able to.
That's terrible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just do it yourself.
They just kind of kick you out when it's time to go.
So we got a whole like backpack worth of stuff that I never actually went through. Did they make you meet with the nutritionist?
Yes, and we had to request additional meetings because Macy's also celiac, surprise.
Yeah.
Which is super fun.
Oh, that's I have that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. We can talk about that later too.
A whole podcast on celiac.
We could do a whole podcast on that.
But yeah, they really don't give you a lot of support going out there. They say, this is your follow-up visit. You meet with the nutritionist, one time. Luckily, we met with them twice before we left the hospital because we didn't feel like what they gave us was adequate. But then that's kind of it. And you go out there and you're supposed to count carbs and give insulin, and there's 1,000 other variables.
Yeah, when we had our meeting with the nutritionist to check the box, and I was like, yeah, I'm not coming back here. I have several friends that are nutritionists that actually had more than, I think it's one class or one semester in med school devoted to nutrition, and that's it. So I'll talk to Vanessa, I'll talk to Laura, I'll talk to the people that I know that know more about this than you do because it is more than, counting carbs and giving injections. It's how does the hormones react? It's how does what she's eating, the whole meal, interact with her absorption of carbs. And some carbs, not all carbs are equal. I can
imagine throwing celiacs in on top of that, because that's a whole nother, you just eliminated, half the
you
food
eliminate a
out there.
lot of foods with celiac. Now, we're lucky now, I think, because there's a lot of...
Why is that with celiac?
They can't have gluten, and so gluten is in anything with a thickener. And it's in everything made with wheat and anything with a thickener. Gravies. Soy sauce has gluten. Why does soy sauce have gluten?
Because it's malted barley, apparently, or malted something, yes.
Yeah. So you're reading labels anyway for carbs, but now you're reading for ingredients and looking for gluten-free. And I think we're lucky now. There's a lot more choices than there were even 3 years ago in terms of substitutions that you can get for things that don't have gluten in them. But it is hard. And Kate is asymptomatic, so we do allow her cheat days where she can, where she has gluten and stuff. And
That's the second time you guys have said asymptomatic, and I don't
Yes.
think I understand what symptoms are then. So you guys are saying that assuming that I know, and we are still breaking this down for brackets, and I have 1,000 questions.
Asymptomatic, meaning not showing outward signs of symptoms. Hey,
No, I get what that means, but
my-
I don't know what the diabetes symptoms
Oh,
are.
Gotcha.
okay. So when you have low blood sugar, and that's classified as anything below 70 BGL, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. If your number is reading below 70, you get shaky, lightheaded, nauseous, angry, kind of hangry type thing, until they get their sugars up. And Kate will get really pale. She actually is very symptomatic, very sensitive to it. And when her sugar starts dropping, if it's in the 80s or below, she'll get pale, she'll get shaky, and she'll get nauseous, and she knows she has to eat. And it takes her 15 to 20 minutes to recover from the low. So she'll eat, but she'll still feel shaky for a while, even after her sugar has come up.
So she'll feel shaky, but she doesn't show shaky.
Mm-hmm.
And your 3-year-old,
Yeah, so it's a little trickier because, if it happens during the night and I go in to kind of roll her over, she'll be soaked. She'll be absolutely soaked. And the doctors told us, that has nothing to do with that, which is not true.
Yes, it does.
Because she was having that before, and we had no idea. She was having all these lows at nighttime. And until we had the monitor, you couldn't see that.
Right.
Which is really terrifying, because if they go too low, you can go into a coma. You can die. There's all kinds of things that can happen. You can have complications. But yeah, we have to wake her up, wake up a child who's dead asleep in the middle of the night, check their finger, put them on the potty, get them awake enough that they're going to drink a juice box. Then you have to go back in 10, 15 minutes later, check them again, make sure it's still coming up. If it didn't come up, all right, now we got to get the milk. This was last night. We were in 3 or 4 times trying to just give her enough that it would bring her up without shooting her, over 300, which you don't want to do. So it's trying to find that delicate balance of how do you treat this without going overboard? How's her body going to react to this, and how much time is it going to take to show?
but you both said they're asymptomatic. So
Kate is
you
not.
have to...
Kate is not. Macy is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can see that she's sweaty, but she can't wake me up to say, hey, I'm feeling low, or, I'm not feeling right, something's going on.
Those do mellow out. Kate doesn't have those dips.
Does Kate have to be checked at night also?
So we checked her at night after her diagnosis, and yes, my husband or I will still go in there in the middle of the night. Now we just check her receiver. She doesn't have to do a finger stick. She's got the Dexcom, and we look at the number.
All right, Sarah, what, Dexcom?
Dexcom is the continuous glucose monitor that she uses. It's a little device that they use arms, stomachs, or I've heard thighs, but we've never used it.
We just
in
do
her
arm.
leg. Yeah. Kate uses her stomach.
So it sticks like a sticker?
It's like a piece of wire.
Like a cannula that goes under your skin,
Yep.
and it reads the fluid in your body, the interstitial fluid, and then it gives you a number that's close to your blood glucose number, but not the same. So it'll give you an idea
It's
of
an
where they're running.
estimate. Reads it every 5 minutes, and it gives you a trend. So you can tell if the numbers are going up, if they're steady, or if they're going down.
So that goes to your cell phone.
Yes.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Goes to the cell phone. It also comes with a receiver. So yeah, we have 2 different means of getting the results.
Wow.
Yep.
That's kind
And
of awesome.
It's amazing in terms of being able to effectively manage their sugars.
Right.
And so we just go in and we check the receiver. She's always trended steady. Like she might have a dip at 4 a.m, but it's not a dip that's ever been significant. So they will grow out of that. I don't know what age they grow out of that, but because I've had other moms that I know who have had toddlers with type 1, and they do grow out of it.
Yeah, because last night, as soon as we gave her a correction dose, she went into sensor error, which means that it's not picking up the number anymore for 1 to 3 hours. So then you do have to go in and do the manual checks and figure out, what they're running. So as soon as I corrected her and I knew she was going to be plummeting down, no idea what her number was.
So do your kids, question for you.
Yeah.
Do your kids tell other people about what's wrong with them or on their own? Are they open about that with other people? Yours is 3, so she's kind of probably chatty about it. But do they, if they see the sensor, do they tell their kids, hey, I have diabetes, whatever?
Yeah, I don't think she knows not to be, We have 2 friends that we go to the park with, and, we eat lunch with them, so we check her finger, and they're very curious about that, and, she'll tell them how to do it, and I think it's great that they're learning too,
Now because
Hold on, I gotta bring it back. Okay.
Okay.
So you did not really find a support group when you found out.
No.
Okay.
It's been
and you didn't
online.
really either?
So I think there were resources in there. I didn't look at them. I do happen to know that there is a camp for diabetic kids in West Virginia.
I just mean moms and
But
neighbors
other
and
moms,
stuff like that.
no. I mean, I know that we were on Facebook, and she mentioned that when Macy got diagnosed, so I reached out to you. Let me know if you have any questions, because I feel at this point I'm kind of old hat at this.
Bam, that's good. And I was going to ask you for sure, because it seems like your boy's situation is kind of unique.
No, we didn't. There weren't any hey, these are resources. I literally had to come home and do my own research on both diagnoses, both the cancer and the Langerhans, which isn't cancer, but it's treated you still get the same treatment like you would for cancer.
Right.
I had to do research on those on my own, and my husband was like, "Stop researching that," and I was like, "No, I need to know I need to know," and because it was scary stuff. It was, oh my gosh, this is not okay. And they just dropped those, hey, your kid has type 1 diabetes. Hey, your kid might have rhabdomyosarcoma. Is that cancer? Yep. And then, and then doctor walks away because they don't want to deal with your emotions. Mm-hmm. That's not their job, really. And sometimes they're really bad at explaining what is going to happen. And I remember his first surgery, they sent in the student doctor to go over all the things that could happen during the surgery. And I was like, I feel bad for you because they gave you the shitty job. And he just looked at me and I was like, no. The real doctor doesn't want to come and tell parents your child could have their face paralyzed after this surgery. They're making you do it.
Wow.
And I'm like, they're toughing you up. And that's kind of what you get. They just come in and they just have this big list. And it's like, okay, this, and this. As if I wasn't already traumatized enough. Thanks.
Yeah.
You didn't even need to tell me any of that.
I always feel like there's just an organization for everything. So there's not an organization for...
I've not heard for support for, deaf kids type of thing. I've not heard of that. And,
I just thought there might be.
I mean, we have...
Everybody links up or something like that. But
we have Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, Beyond Type 1. There's a lot of different organizations, but I don't know if there's any specifically for parent resources. I mean, there's a lot of research and there's a lot of, knowledge, but there's a dearth of the emotion-based, you don't have, my kid's been diagnosed with a chronic condition. Now I can go cry to my friends, but unless they've been there, they're not going to get it. And there's really I don't think there's any support group right, for kids with chronic conditions.
You know, that word support group, it almost has like a negative connotation all the time.
Right.
And I feel like I need support groups all the time, specifically in business and stuff like that. So I have like a few business colleagues that I chew their ear and they chew mine. And every once in a while we get together and have like a lunch. And it is extremely beneficial to get 90 minutes with somebody who has a myriad of like-minded challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think we need community. Like if there's moms with kids with diabetes, then there should be like a 1 hour or 2 hour meetup every quarter where you just get together and vent or talk about something that worked or talk about things you're challenged with. And same thing with, you know, kids that are hard of hearing. I mean, I don't know anything about kids or babies with illnesses, but I do know that people can get a lot of help by just meeting and just having conversations like this one here. You know, it's you guys light up on your stories and you have so much to share, and there could be somebody listening that's just challenged with the exact same thing. And it's important to get those support groups going.
Because it's hard to talk to other moms who have, you know, in my case, children who are neurotypical and aren't deaf and who haven't been through 8 surgeries and who do not have to explain why they wear, you know, their child doesn't have to explain to every other child why they wear a hearing aid. You know, when you look at other kids who have no health problems, you're like, why did mine get everything? Like, you know.
So is there any, like, a support group or resources locally for Colin to like, play or interact with other kids that are hearing impaired?
I have not seen anything like that, no.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I see, it's funny because when you're out and about, I see very few kids who actually, it's very rare to see other kids wearing hearing aids.
Right.
Like, I don't see that hardly ever. I mean, I remember he was playing soccer, and in the middle of a game, some kid ran up and grabbed him, and we're like, what is this kid doing? And afterwards, we asked Colin what happened, and he was like, he wanted to know why I was wearing this thing on my ear, and I told him it was a hearing aid, and I'm deaf. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, and then the game resumed. Well, at least you were, you know.
Yeah. I think one thing Kate had a problem with when she was first diagnosed, of course, you know, at 11, I don't want to be different. And so wearing the CGN, now she wears it on her stomach, but she did wear it on the arm, but it's still visible,
Right.
Especially now that she likes the crop top. Yeah. So, you know, she didn't want to be different. And so there is actually a Camp Nokema, in West Virginia for type 1 diabetic kids. They can go from the time they're 7 to they're about 15, 16. And they have not had a session. Kate was actually coming around and she's like, you know, Mom, I think I want to go. She said this to me last year. I think I want to go because I want to be around more kids that have my condition. And of course, COVID canceled the camp. They've canceled this year too. And now she's going to age out. So she's not going to get that opportunity to go. And I don't see any other resources for type 1 diabetic kids in that pre-adulthood teenage range that she's 15, 16, 17, you know, before they hit adulthood. So I guess, I don't know, I think she knows another type 1 kid from school, maybe one more. I think there were 7 when she was at Harper's Ferry. I don't know how many are at Washington, but yeah. So I think it's, I mean, not that I wish that any diagnosis on any kid, but if we can find, you know, support for them too, that would be helpful.
I totally agree.
So, yeah.
Any final words from anybody about anything coming up? Or, I mean, I think what's cool, and this is, you know, if you're into it, you could have this parenting podcast as many times as you want to.
Okay.
I think it's a great topic. I'm sitting here quiet, just
because
listening
we have,
and learning.
oh yeah, we have the school discussion, daycare discussion. The 504 plan in and of itself could be 2 hours.
I think I would like to just remind people that, like, my child is a child and he has a disability, or he's deaf, so he technically does have a disability, physical disability, medical disability. And we have been told by his ENT that if they cannot figure out how to correct the inside of his ear and make it the way it's normal, to make it normal per se, he will be tied to seeing an ENT every 3 months for the rest of his life. Right. They're like, when he goes to college, you're going to have to research an ENT like me, who this guy is like a neurological something ENT. He's like specialist in his field. in his already specialized field, you're going to have to find somebody like me that he can go see every 3 months. And then when he's an adult and he gets a job and he moves, he's got to find somebody like me
Right.
that he can see every 3 months.
Wow.
And, you know, one of the options that could solve all these problems could be that they could go in and literally fill his entire ear cavity in, and he would just be deaf, and he could not even wear a hearing aid. Like, he could just be deaf.
Wow.
And they're like, that's not really an option we would choose unless,
Exactly.
you know, it was just completely to the point where, like, we're like, this is not manageable by, like, any means, I guess. But that was one of the options when he was much younger, was we may have to just fill it all in with, I don't know what they put in there, cement, something.
Wow.
And he would just be deaf, and he wouldn't even be able to wear a hearing aid.
How old is he now?
He's 10.
Right, so
That's crazy.
Yeah.
the medical advancements in the next 10 years.
Like, the fact that he goes, I have not seen the laser surgery room at Fairfax, because the past 2 surgeries, we let him choose what, because luckily when your child is young and they have surgery at Fairfax, a parent gets to go back to the operating room with them. It's very scary to see all of that, let me tell you. And you can be with them while, we call it, they give them the gas, because they don't do the IV or anything on them until they've had gas and they're kind of like already out a little bit, so they're not traumatized by constantly getting needles. And so I can't imagine having to do what you guys do. And my husband said that, you know, the laser room is the far back operating room at the children's surgery wing in Fairfax. He says you have to go past all these other kids having surgery, and they have windows in the door so you can kind of see what's going on. So that's really weird in and of itself. And he says, and then you get to Colin's room, and that room has a black window because there's a laser in there. And there's a special guy in there, and that's his job, is to run this medical laser and to know how to operate it. Wow. So they don't accidentally, like, laser a part of your kid's head that's not supposed to be lasered. So, you know, it's just all these things that we kind of, like, we have to keep in the back of our brain all the time that I think about that parents with children who aren't sick or who don't have medical conditions, they never have to worry about. And I'm like, oh my God, you're so lucky you never have to worry about going to the doctor. And we schedule these appointments. We went in February, we're going on May 17th. We just know, like, the third Monday every 3 months, we're going to Reston to see Dr. McKenzie, and keeping our fingers crossed that, and, you know, the last time we went, he was like, well, we have surgery again this summer, you know, and luckily they're not, you know, emergency, and we're able to put them off into the summer where, you know, he misses a couple weeks of swimming, and that's okay.
Holy moly.
So that's what are they going to do as adults? That's a very real and a very scary.
I have faith, because
possibility. That's a very scary question.
I mean, 10, 15 years in the future, which is when real adulthood hits. I mean, medicine continues to improve. There'll be advancements, and you got to figure by the time 20 years from now, he probably would not have to continue going.
We're hoping that's the case. We're hoping. Yeah. I mean, even in the 7 years, that he's probably going to get a new hearing aid this summer, because the audiologist says that they have come out with advancements in hearing aid technology, and she has recommended that he get a new one. So we're probably going to be like, okay, we're going to chunk down the however much money that the insurance won't pay to upgrade the hardware, as we call it, you know.
Yeah. Jeannette, what about you?
Well, I think just trying to get through, you know, through preschool. That's like our next, like, big hurdle. You know, she hasn't been with anyone except my husband and I in the last 8 months, and that's pretty terrifying. So we did a couple tours. You know, we went to the same place a few times, decided it was the right fit. You know, everything we brought up, they were like, okay, just tell us what to do. Okay. And I was like, all right, this will be good.
Nice.
This will be good. But I think I'll probably still sit in the parking lot, you know, the first couple of days for sure. It's only twice a week for like 3 hours. You know, she'll have her monitor. They'll be able to see it. We'll be able to see it. So I think that'll just give us some more confidence, and, you know, maybe let somebody else watch her every now and then.
Right.
So I think that's our next step.
Jammer.
So at this point, my next step is I'm done being upset about the diagnosis, and now I'm just, I guess, angry. And I'm like, I want a cure. And so I follow I follow Beyond Type 1 on Facebook. I follow JDRF on Facebook. I'm currently part of a 300,000 Steps in April challenge.
I saw that.
I am raising money for diabetes research. So I am 122,000 steps in already. So I have the rest of the month to get to 300,000. And, I'm looking out for races. Last summer we did a Ragnar type race locally that benefited Beyond Type 1. So I'll just continue to fundraise in hopes that there's a cure. So anyone listening, go to my Facebook page, Jami Cashell on Facebook. Give me money.
There you go. That's
And thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Jeannette, for joining us today.
Thank you guys.
All right.
This is really good. Thanks a lot, guys.